This video is the final part of the series, There Are Wounds No One Sees. It's no longer about recognizing or explaining, but about something more important, how to begin changing. Not by forcing yourself to become better, but by returning and clearly seeing what's happening inside. If you've gone through the previous two parts, you'll understand that seeing is not enough. What matters now is staying with yourself instead of continuing to avoid like before. You don't lack information about yourself. What you lack is actually stopping to look. Every day you go through many emotions, but most of them pass by without being recognized. Not because they aren't important, but because you don't give them attention. When they're not seen, emotions don't disappear. They move inward and continue to affect you in ways you don't notice. You've gotten used to reacting quickly. A feeling of discomfort appears, and you immediately want to do something to change it. This creates a sense of control, but in reality, you're just avoiding it. When reaction becomes the default, you no longer clearly see what you're feeling. You just know you're uncomfortable and want to escape without understanding why it appeared in the first place. Sitting with your emotions is not comfortable. When there's nothing to distract you, what you've pushed down will slowly surface. You'll feel restless, uneasy, even want to stop right away. But it's exactly at that moment that you begin to come into contact with your inner reality. Not the version you want to present, but what is actually there. In Buddhism, this is the foundation of mindfulness. The Buddha taught, contemplate the body in the body, the mind in the mind. This is not about thinking about yourself, but directly seeing what is happening. When you observe without rushing to interfere, you create a small space between you and your reaction. That space is where clarity begins. You don't need to understand everything immediately. Your only task is to recognize what you're feeling, what you're thinking. No added story, no over-explaining, just look. If you look long enough, you'll see that emotions are not fixed. They change, rise and fall, appear and disappear. But because you don't stay, you've never clearly seen this. One difficulty is that you're used to judging everything. You label emotions as good or bad, so when bad emotions arise, you immediately want to get rid of them. This prevents you from ever understanding them. Meanwhile, the Buddha taught neither clinging nor pushing away. When you stop resisting, you begin to see the nature of emotions instead of just reacting to them. You may start to notice that many emotions repeat in the same way. The same patterns of thought, the same reactions, only different situations. This isn't random, it's a habit that has been formed. When you observe, you begin to see these patterns, and when you see them clearly, you're no longer completely carried away by them as before. You don't need to change everything right away. Trying to change too early often leads to failure because you haven't understood enough. When you observe, you're building a foundation. You're learning to stay with yourself without reacting immediately. It may sound simple, but very few people can do it consistently. There will be times when you forget. You'll react the old way again, avoid things the old way again. That's normal. Mindfulness isn't about being perfectly aware all the time. It's about returning once you realize you've lost awareness. Each time you notice, you strengthen your ability to see clearly, not through theory, but through direct experience. The Buddha once said, "There is no path to mindfulness. Mindfulness is the path." This means you don't need to wait until everything feels okay before you observe. You observe right in your current state, even if it's uncomfortable or messy. That is what creates real change, not waiting for perfect conditions. As you begin to see more clearly, you'll notice that many of your past reactions were automatic. You didn't truly choose them. They happened out of habit. When you see this, a small pause appears. And in that pause, you can choose a different response or no response at all. This is where freedom begins, even if it's small. You'll realize that emotions are not something to fix. They are something to understand. When you understand them, you no longer fear them the way you used to. You don't need to get rid of them or hold on to them. You simply see them as they are. And this removes a lot of the pressure you used to put on yourself whenever emotions became uncomfortable. Not everything will disappear immediately. What has built up over time will take time to settle. But when your way of seeing changes, you're no longer swept away, like before. You begin to live more slowly, more clearly, with fewer reactions. This doesn't make life easier right away, but it makes you steadier in facing it. What matters is not reaching a perfect state, but maintaining the ability to see clearly. When you hold on to that awareness, you're no longer completely dependent on external circumstances to feel okay. You have a point of stability within, and from there, healing is no longer a distant goal, but a process unfolding day by day. You often think your emotions define who you are. When you feel sad, you assume you're a negative person. When you feel anxious, you believe you're weak. But this way of seeing things keeps you stuck. Emotions are only temporary states, not a fixed identity. When you attach yourself to them, you unknowingly hold on to them longer and let them define how you see yourself. An emotion appears, and you react immediately. There's no pause, no observation. You get carried away by the stream of thoughts that comes with it. When this repeats often enough, you can no longer distinguish between the emotion and yourself. You just know that you feel this way, and you believe it reflects who you truly are. You may notice that emotions are always changing. They don't stay in one fixed state. But because you don't observe continuously, you only see the strongest part of them. You think they last, but in reality, they are shifting little by little. When you don't see this, you get swept away and believe you have no control. You often say, "I am disappointed," but that way of speaking makes you merge with the emotion. If you look more clearly, it's simply a state of disappointment arising. When you shift this perspective, you create a small distance. That distance helps you avoid being completely absorbed by the emotion and allows you to observe it more clearly. In Buddhism, this reflects the principle of non-self. The Buddha taught that there is no fixed self behind every experience. What you call yourself is just a combination of many changing factors. When you see this, you no longer need to cling to each emotion as if it were an inseparable part of you. You don't lose yourself when you let go of emotions. On the contrary, you become less bound by them. When you stop identifying with them, you can experience emotions without being controlled by them. You still feel them, but you're not carried away. This is very different from trying to suppress or avoid emotions as you did before. Many people think that not identifying means becoming cold or distant, but that's not the case. You still feel everything, even more clearly than before. The difference is that you're no longer completely driven by your emotions. You can see them come and go without reacting immediately out of habit. You'll start to notice that most of your reactions are automatic. An emotion appears and triggers a familiar chain of thoughts. If you don't observe it, you'll keep repeating that chain. But with awareness, you begin to see the pattern. And once you see it clearly, you have the chance not to follow it as before. The Buddha once taught, "What is not yours, is not you, is not yourself." When you apply this to emotions, You begin to understand that they are not something you need to hold on to. They are simply part of an experience unfolding. When you stop seeing them as yours, you reduce the pressure to control or change them. You don't need to do much with your emotions. You just need to stop clinging to them. It sounds simple, but it's not easy because you're used to reacting immediately. But each time you notice and pause, you create a space. In that space, you can choose a different response or no response at all. You'll feel lighter when you stop carrying emotions as a fixed part of yourself. What you once thought was your personality is often just repeated reactions. When you stop attaching yourself to them, you open up the possibility for change, not by forcing it, but by no longer feeding the old patterns. Emotions don't disappear the moment you observe them. They still arise, sometimes strongly, but your relationship with them changes. You're no longer pulled in with the same intensity. This creates a sense of inner stability, not entirely dependent on whether emotions are positive or negative. You can try seeing an emotion the way you would watch a cloud passing by. It appears, changes, and then fades. You don't need to hold on to it or push it away. When you maintain this way of seeing, you're no longer trapped in each state. You begin to see the natural movement of the mind. Not identifying is not a technique, it's a way of seeing. When you realize that emotions are not you, you no longer feel the need to fight them. You allow them to exist without letting them define you. This removes a great deal of the tension you used to create by trying to control everything. As you maintain this awareness, you gradually step out of the old loop. You no longer react automatically every time an emotion appears. You have more choices, more pauses. And from those pauses, you begin to live more clearly, no longer fully controlled by what is only temporary. Not everything needs to be erased for it to be called healing. The idea that you have to completely forget the past in order to feel lighter makes many people force themselves. The more you try to push it away, the more it returns in other forms. Healing is not about erasing, it's about changing your relationship with memories and emotions. When your way of seeing changes, what once felt heavy no longer carries the same weight. Old emotions can still arise, but the way they affect you is no longer the same. Before, a small trigger could cause a strong reaction. After gaining clarity, the same emotion can come and go without pulling along a chain of thoughts. The difference isn't that the emotion disappears, but that it no longer controls your entire inner state. In Buddhism, letting go doesn't mean ignoring or denying. Letting go means not holding tightly to what is constantly changing. The Buddha taught that attachment is the root of suffering. When you cling to a story, an emotion, a memory, you bind yourself to it. When you let go, you don't lose anything. You simply stop being trapped in the same loop. The old habit is to try to fix everything immediately. When discomfort appears, you want it gone. When pain shows up, you want it to stop. But this approach keeps you in a state of resisting yourself. When you stop trying to fix and begin to understand, things shift. There's no longer pressure to be okay right away. Instead, there is a slower process, but a more real one. Understanding doesn't come from thinking more. It comes from clearly seeing what is happening. When you observe an emotion from the moment it arises to when it fades, you understand how it works. And when you understand, you no longer react the same way. Not because you force control, but because you're no longer carried away in the same way. There are things you once tried to forget, but the more you tried, the more they stayed. Not because they were too strong, but because they were never seen clearly. When you allow them to be present without avoiding them, they begin to lose their pressure. What once felt overwhelming becomes clearer, and when it's clear, it's no longer as frightening. The Buddha once taught, "Hatred is never ended by hatred. It is ended by compassion." This applies not only to others, but also to yourself. When you keep blaming yourself, you're adding another layer of pain onto what's already there. Compassion toward yourself is not indulgence, it's stopping the act of hurting yourself. Being used to self-judgment makes every mistake feel heavier. A single reaction that doesn't go as you hoped is enough to make you think something is wrong with you. But seen differently, it's just a reaction that has been formed before. There's no need to reject it. Just see it clearly and don't continue feeding it the same way. Letting go is not a one-time action. It's a process repeated many times. Each time an emotion arises and you don't cling to it, that is a moment of letting go. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs awareness and a willingness not to hold on as before. Over time, the distance between you and what you experience grows. There will be days when everything feels like it's back to the way it was. Strong emotions, negative thoughts, familiar reactions. That doesn't mean you haven't made progress. It simply shows that what has built up over time needs time to settle. The difference is that you begin to see it as it happens, instead of only realizing it after it has passed. In Buddhism, letting go is not about abandoning life. It's about releasing unnecessary attachment. When you stop holding tightly, you have more space to experience. Emotions arise, you see them. Emotions pass, you know it. No need to hold on, no need to push away. This creates a lightness you may have never felt before. Healing doesn't happen in a straight line. Sometimes it's clear, sometimes it's unclear. Sometimes you feel light, sometimes heavy again. What matters is not returning to the old ways of denial or force. As long as you keep observing and understanding, even slowly, you're moving in the right direction. It doesn't have to be fast, it just has to be real. The way you treat yourself shapes everything. If you're always harsh, you'll always feel lacking. If you allow some compassion, you begin to feel enough. Not because everything is perfect, but because you stop adding pressure to what is already difficult. Self-compassion is the foundation for any real change. There is no clear endpoint to this, no moment where you are completely done. There is only the ongoing process of seeing, letting go, and understanding. A little each day. Each moment of awareness is a step. You don't need to reach a special state, you just need to not return to the way of living you've already seen clearly. This journey doesn't end here. What you see today is only a small part. If you continue to observe, you'll see even more deeply. Not to find more problems, but to understand how your mind truly works. And when that understanding is deep enough, lightness is no longer something you have to chase, it naturally appears.